Well, hello everyone, my name is Swigo and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be beating Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green without gaining any sort of experience. I've seen other YouTubers like Smallant and Dobbs do this in Pokemon Crystal, Emerald and Red and Blue, but nobody has actually done it in Fire Red and Leaf Green. And I thought that it would be very interesting to try this kind of challenge because it's something rather unusual. And now you might ask yourself, how do you actually not gain any experience? Well, it's actually a patch that you can download on the internet. You have to put that on your Fire Red realm and boom, you can't gain any experience anymore. So the point of this challenge is actually working with Pokemon that you have available to you in the wild with their base levels without being able to level them up. And with these Pokemon you have to find a strategy to beat every single gym, of course. Well, the rules are very easy. I can't gain any experience, I can capture any Pokemon that I want to use on my team, and I won't be able to use any rare candy so that I will always have the base levels available to me. Make sure to smash that like button, click that subscribe button if you aren't subscribed already, and let's get right into it. Right now we're going to be naming ourselves Help because that's exactly what I need for trying to attempt a no XP challenge. Our rival's name is going to be Denied because I have a feeling that when we face the champion, he's going to deny me the victory. Then I go to the lab to pick my starter and I go for Squirtle because he's quite defensive and that's exactly what I'm going to be needing because he can't learn any moves. His name is No Squirt because he will never be able to use any kind of water type moves because he's always going to be level 5. I then have my first rival fight against Denied and of course I already get denied in the first fight. Great. After then delivering the package to Professor Oak, I immediately head to Viridian Forest. And over there I capture myself 5 Weedles because the only way that I can think of to take down Brock is to poison him with the Weedles and eventually take him out. And Squirtle I will also keep because he can probably tank a few moves. And so after getting my awesome team together that obviously can't be beaten, I go to the first gym. His Geodude is no problem almost 100% of the time because he does not know Rock Tomb and basically can't one-shot any of my Pokemon. His Onix is a different kind of threat because he does know Rock Tomb and he can basically one-shot all of my team except for Squirtle. This fight is basically just a load of RNG that needs to be turned in my favor. After about an hour of attempts, I finally got enough luck to beat up Brock. We have to get lucky on our first Weedle because he has to poison the Geodude. If my Weedle faints before the Geodude's poisoned, I have to reset. Luckily in this one, my first Weedle manages to poison him and also do some additional damage with Poison Sting. Then my Weedle finally fainted, I switched in the next Weedle and he switched out his Geodude for his Onix and I Poison Stinged him and got the poison from the first go. I got off a few more Poison Stings and then I finally fainted, so I went into Squirtle to tank some hits. He did a very great job and then I used some Tail Whips and some Tackles and eventually my Squirtle was also taken out. Then G came out. I had to go and sacrifice him, but the poison damage did take the Onix out and then his last Pokemon Geodude was up. With just 2 Weedles remaining, I was not that confident, but the Geodude just kept on using Defense Curl. Eventually he did take down G. Then I had to switch in God to finish it off with a few more Poison Stings and some poison damage. Damn, and this was only the first gym. Then I had to go to Mount Moon to catch a whole new team. I started off by catching 3 Paras because that's really what we're going to be needing against Misty. I also got myself a Geodude which is going to be able to tank some hits from my rival's Pidgeotto. I also got a Zubat, but that really isn't that useful, and also 2 Clefairies, which are very OP because they have Sing and they can have Q-Charm. I then went to the 2 move tutors which teach you Mega Punch and Mega Kick and teach that to my Geodude and my Clefairy. And with this team I attempted the next rival fight. The first Pokemon Pidgeotto is one of the most annoying Pokemon on his team because it has access to Sand Attack. With my first Geodude being able to do some very decent damage, I eventually did go down because I missed most of my Mega Punches. Then my second Geodude was able to bring it down to red health, but then he also went down and Clefairy had to come in and finish it off with a Mega Kick. Then Rattata came out, I stayed in with Jigglypuff, used a Mega Kick but we went down, then a Paras managed to bring it down into red health but he also got taken out. Then I switched in my Zubat and took it out with a Leech Life, and next up was this Abra who can't even hit us because it only has Teleport, so I just used this opportunity to get some life points back. The next Pokemon is Bulbasaur, so I immediately switch into my Paras and Stun Spore it to paralyze it because that's really crucial in this fight. He does have access to Sleep Powder, which is very annoying, but the only attacking move that he has is Vine Whip. And even though that he probably put me to sleep around 5 times, I eventually did get the victory. Then it was time for Misty, and as you might think, this fight wasn't that hard either because of the Paras that we have on the team. For this fight, I did teach my Paras Bullet Seed because it's going to make it a lot easier. I of course start off by Stun Sporing this first Pokemon Staryu and then just shoot Bullet Seeds at them until the cows come home, and eventually after she heals up, it finally goes down, and next up is the Starmie. Even though I still have my full team remaining, it isn't going to be that easy. I decide to switch into another Paras to Stun Spore it so that my other Paras can later on hit it with some Bullet Seeds. I also get some scratches in, but eventually we go down. Because this Starmie just used Rapid Spin, I switch into my Clefairy. I use Encore to lock it into it because it's its weakest move. Then I switch into my Paras, and of course I misclick, and that's a fatal ending to that Paras. I go back into my other Clefairy and I put another Encore on the Starmie because the other one ran out, and I start Mega Kicking it. It isn't able to do any more significant damage, so we easily take it out and win our second gym badge. Then we go to Bill because he turned himself back into a Clefairy like always. I turn him back and get the SS ticket. Then it's time to do some big upgrades on the team, and with big, I mean big. I go to Diglett Tunnel, capture myself 4 Diglets and also 2 Duck Trios because these Duck Trios are level 29 and level 31, which is very high for this point in the game. So after doing these upgrades, I immediately head to the SS Anne and fight my rival again. His team is really nothing compared to my team now because I have such high level mons, and my Duck Trio easily takes out his Pidgeotto with a few Fury Swipes. Next up is Ivysaur, so I use a Dig and a Samtomb to take it down. And his last 2 Pokemon, Raticate and Kadabra, are also an easy one-shot with a Dig. After the win, I get myself the HM for Cut and go to Lieutenant Surge. But because our team is now built out of a lot of ground types, we can easily take down his first 2 Pokemon, Voltorb and Pikachu, with 2 digs. But then Raichu comes out, which is a little bit more difficult because he used Double Team and my digs miss a lot. So I opted to go for Sand Tomb and do some chip damage. Eventually my Duck Trio almost got taken out by a quick attack, but I got off one more Sand Tomb to win myself the 3rd gym badge. Because I am a master at Rock Tunnel now, it only took me about 2 hours to finish it. Just kidding, just like 5 minutes. After that, I immediately went to the Pokemon Tower to fight our rival again. This time his Pidgeotto actually managed to do some decent damage with Gust and Quick Attack, but still a few Fury Swipes was enough to take it out. And next up was this Ivysaur again. I got lucky because my Dig was a critical hit and that took him down, otherwise my Mole probably would have been dead. Next up is one of the scariest things on his team, his Gyarados, so I switch into Geodude to take the Intimidate and then go into Diglett. I go through all of my Diglets until I eventually get to a Duck Trio. I managed to Fury Swipe him twice, but then he also took me down with a Thrash. And then finally I switched back into my Big Mole and he took him out. Then his last 2 Pokemon were Growlithe and Kadabra, which both were an easy one-shot with Dig. Since the next gym is Grass type, I knew that I had to get a different team for that one. So I went into grass and captured myself 3 Growlithes and also a Doduo. After stacking up my team with these Pokemon, I went to the Pokemart and got myself 3 Firestones to evolve my Growlithes into Arcanines, since that's going to give them a big stat boost. I also thought that you could buy the TM for Fire Blast, but that apparently isn't true in this game. I also got myself the HM for Fly, which I learned to my Doduo so that he could do more damage. With our buffed up team, I immediately went to her gym. I decided to lead with Arcanine and go for some Embers. I managed to get it into half health, but then we got taken out because of an acid. Then I decided to go into Doduo because I knew that it was going to outspeed, and a Fly finished it off. Next up was her Tangela, and I knew that my Arcanine was going to be able to win because Tangela's special defense is pretty atrocious. And I also got lucky that my first Ember burned it, so the second one was able to take it out because of the burn damage. Next up was the Vileplume, so I decided to stay in, hit it with 2 Embers, and then I got taken out, so I had to switch in another Arcanine. This one got a critical hit which put it into healing range, so she healed up with a hyper potion, and I continued to use Ember until I did a huge chunk of damage again. Then we also got taken out by an acid, so I switched in Doduo and he was able to finish it off with a fly. Then I traversed some puzzles under the game corner and eventually I puzzled my way to Giovanni. His team consists of an Onyx, Rhyhorn and Kangaskhan, and he starts off with Onyx, which is very easy for me to take down because I got a critical dig. Next up was Rhyhorn, and that thing was a little bit harder. It took 2 digs, but really not much of a problem there. Now the last Pokemon, Kangaskhan, is a bit of a problem because he's quite tanky and he hits like a truck. He always goes for Fake Out on the first turn and it did so much damage on my Duck Trio. Luckily I survived and I was able to go for a dig, and then I realized that it barely did any damage. But then I switched into my next Duck Trio, I got a critical dig which did a lot of damage, and then I was able to take him out. I got the Silph Scope, rescued Mr. Fuji from the Pokemon Tower and Team Rocket, and then I got myself a Snorlax, which is going to be very big. Literally. I give him his usual rapper name and then head on to the Safari Zone. Over here I'm going to be able to catch a lot more team members. I start off with an Execute. I also got myself a Seaking, which is going to be important for Blaine's gym. Then I also got myself a Nidorino, which I named Burger King, which I'm also going to be evolving into a Nidoking. I then got myself a Nidorina, which I will be evolving into a Nidoqueen, and I also got myself a Venomoth, which is going to be very useful against Koga. After my little catching spree, I evolved my Nidorina into Nidoqueen and my Nidorino into Nidoking. Since they're part ground type, I went back to the store to get myself 2 TMs for Dig, and I learned it to them, because that's going to be one of the best stab moves available to them right now. I also got myself the TM for Psychic, which I learned to Venomoth, and now I'm fully prepared to take on Koga. I start off with Burger King and I use a Surf on the Coughing, which does a load of damage, but the next one I miss because of the smoke screen, and then he explodes with self-destruct. Luckily my Nidoking lives with 2 health. Next up was Muk, so I decide to stay in and go for a Dig, which does a huge chunk of damage, but then we get taken out, so I go into Venomoth and go for a Psychic. It didn't do that much damage, but I did get the special defense drop, which meant that next turn I was able to take it out. The second Coughing was an easy one-shot, and last up was Wheezing, which is level 43. Since he used Smokescreen on me, I missed a load of Psychics, but I managed to hit 2, which brought him down into red health. Then I switched in Nidoqueen, he healed up, and I decided to spam Surf till the cows came home. But they really didn't want to come home because he just kept on healing, but eventually after using about 10 to 11 Surfs, he went down. And that's the 5th gym match under our belt. I knew that the next gym was going to be Erika, so I captured 2 more Executes, got myself some Leaf Stones and evolved them into Exegutors because they are very bulky, they have access to Hypnosis and Leech Seed, which is very good against her gym because it's Psychic type, and we resist that. But before we can challenge Sabrina, it's first time for another rival fight. For this fight I did change up my team a little bit. I have Snorlax and Seaking on the team now as well. But his first Pokemon, Pidgeot, managed to use a Feather Dance on my Snorlax, so I used Yawn and switched into Seaking. I started Surfing, but he was smart and switched into Venusaur. So I then went into my Venomoth. I got put to sleep by a Sleep Powder, but I managed to take him out in 3 Psychics. Next was Alakazam, so I switched back into Snorlax and used Headbutt twice to take it out. Pidgeot came back out, but he was still asleep, so I got a free headbutt off, but then he used Feather Dance, which really made my headbutt a lot weaker. He then almost killed me with a wing attack, but 2 more headbutts finished it off. His last Pokemon was Gyarados, so I just sacrificed my Snorlax and then I switched into my Venomoth. I tried to stun Spore it, but I got flinched by Bite and he took me out next turn. Then I went into my Duck Trio, managed to get him down into half health by using a load of Fury Swipes, but eventually my Duck Trio did faint because he couldn't take that many hits. So I decided to go into my Nidoking and I used 3 Horn attacks and I was left with only 2 HP, but I did take down the Gyarados, and finally was the Growlithe. So I used Surf, brought him down into red health, he took me down with a takedown, switched into Nidoqueen and took him down with another Surf. After then getting my Lapras, I went straight to Giovanni. His first Pokemon, Nidorina, really isn't that much of a threat, so I decided to lead with Snorlax and 3 of my headbutts took it down. Next up is Nidoqueen, so I decided to switch. Into Seeking, I decided to go for a few surfs, got off 2, but he took me down. Then I went into my Nidoking, his Nidoqueen really couldn't touch him, and 2 digs took it out. Now his big boy Kangaskhan was there, and he really tanked a lot of my hits very well, even though that double kick is super effective, but he took me down with a Mega Punch. Switched into Nidoqueen, got off another double kick and a surf, but he also took me down. Then I decided to go into Snorlax, but he couldn't tank a Mega Punch, so he's down as well. Then I decided to go into Venomoth, and he managed to take it out with 2 Psychics. Rhyhorn, like always, is really not a problem for my Duck Trio, and 3 digs finished the battle with Giovanni. I get myself the Master Ball and head straight to Sabrina's gym. She started off with her Kadabra, and I of course led with Lil Fatty, and a single headbutt was enough to take it down because Kadabra's defense suck. Next up was Mr. Mime, so I decided to put it to sleep with Yawn and then switch into my Exeggutor to Leech Seed it. Then I just decided to use Confusion until he went down into red health, and then Sabrina healed him up, so I had to do that all over again. He woke up, put him back to sleep with Hypnosis, kept on confusioning. But eventually he confused me with Psybeam, so I hit myself in my confusion and he managed to take me out. I switched into another Exeggutor and he got a critical hit with Psybeam, which took me out in a single hit. Then I switched into my last Exeggutor, tried to paralyze him, but he used Baton Pass to go into Venomoth. So I stun spored that thing and used Confusion twice, but then we got taken out by a Leech Seed, so I switched into my own Venomoth and took it down with a Psychic. Mr. Mime decided to come back out, so I used Headbutt with Lil Fatty to take it out, and last up was Alakazam, and 2 Headbutts finished it off, even though a Calm Mind boosted Psychic hit my Snorlax and he tanked it. After I got my 6th gym badge, I had to Cinnabar Island, got myself DTM for Tombstone by using the quiz, and eventually I got to Blaine. And I'm not gonna lie, his team was one of the hardest teams to beat in this entire game because of his Arcanine. He would basically one-shot all of my Pokemon since I'm about 15 levels below him. Even though I had loads of super effective moves against his team, I still had a pretty rough time. But eventually I did beat him. With this first Pokemon being Growlithe, I decided to lead with Seeking. I know that I can take him out with 2 Surfs, and that's exactly what I do here. Next up was his Ponyta, and even though the Fire Blast did a load of damage, I hung on with 2 HP and managed to finish it off with 2 Surfs as well. Then Rapidash came out and that finished off my Seeking. So then I switched into Lapras, who was able to tank a Fire Blast and hit a big Surf, but then next turn we got taken out as well. So then I switched to Nidoking. I was able to tank another Fire Blast, and a single dig was enough to take down the Rapidash. Next was Arcanine, so I switched into my Duck Trio to take the Intimidate. I decided to go for a Mud Slap to lower its accuracy, but then we got taken out in a single hit, and I switched in my Snorlax. I managed to hit 2 Headbutts, and then I decided to go for Yawn a few times because I knew that he had a full heal, so I just kept on spamming Yawn until he was asleep and he couldn't use a full heal anymore. And then the Arcanine took down my Snorlax, so I switched in my Nidoking. He was asleep, I got a critical dig, and the next dig took it out, and we have the 7th gym badge under our belt as well. Now normally I don't do the Sevi Islands, but because I am going to be needing the 3 legendary birds to beat up the Pokemon League, I will be doing them this time. After wasting a fortune of my money on Great Balls because Ultra Balls aren't available in the Sevi Islands, I eventually did capture the Moltres. And I named it Rubber because it looks kinda like a rubber chicken that's on fire. Then I went to the power plant to capture my 2nd legendary bird Zapdos, and because I still had some Great Balls left, I couldn't be asked to buy Ultra Balls. After about half an hour of attempting to throw my Great Balls at it, I did capture it. And I named it Zaptress because Uno dos tres, and if you switch it around it's different, I guess. And then I went to the islands to capture myself an Articuno, and this time I just used my Master Ball. I then named it Snow Owl and decided to take on Don Giovanni. But I did decide to use my other Pokemon as well because the legendary birds are kind of OP. So the first Pokemon, Rhyhorn, easily went down with a Surf for my Nidoking. Next up was Duck Trio, and I decided to go into Lapras. He managed to tank an Earthquake, bring it down into red health, he healed up, and I used another Surf and we got taken out by a Slash. So I switched in Snorlax and finished it off with a Headbutt. Next up was Nidoqueen, and I couldn't outspeed, and an Earthquake was too much for my Snorlax. Then I tried to go into Nidoking, but an Earthquake also took me out, so I then went into Articuno and finished all of his next Pokemon off with some Ice Beams. Now before we can take on the Pokemon League, it's time for another rival fight. And his first two Pokemon, Pidgeot and Rhyhorn, easily went down with some Ice Beams from my Articuno. Next up was Growlithe, so I decided to switch in Burger King and hit it with a Surf, but then he switched in next turn to his Gyarados, who took down my Burger King. So I decided to switch in Zapdos. I misclicked by going for Drill Peck, and next turn I did take him out with a Shockwave. Growlithe came back out, so I switched back into Lapras and took him down with a Surf. And next up was this Ace Venusaur, who my Articuno easily took down with a single Blizzard. Last up was Alakazam, and since that thing is quite weak in defense, I switched back into Snorlax, hit it with a Headbutt and a Strength to win ourselves the battle. I didn't capture anything anymore in the victory road because that really wasn't needed to beat up the Elite Four. The Legendary Birch should be enough. So onto the first one, Lorelei. With her first Pokemon being Dewgong, I decided to lead with Zapdos, and 2 Shockwaves was enough to take it out. Next up was Slowbro, and that thing went down in 2 Shockwaves as well. Now Lapras came out, and I decided to switch into Venomoth to get rid of the Yawn. After sacrificing it, I went back into Zapdos. And I decided to go for Thunder. It almost took it out in one hit, and it also paralyzed. Luckily it had a Citrus Berry, which brought it out of healing range. And it also just used Confuse Ray, so next turn I was easily able to take it out with a Shockwave. Next up was Jinx, so I decided to go into Moltres, but she put me to sleep and did a lot of damage with Ice Punch. Eventually I woke up, I used Flamethrower, it wasn't enough, so she healed up, and the next Flamethrower burned her, which was enough to take her out in a single hit. Last up was Cloyster, and that thing's special defense is non-existent, so a single Shockwave took it out. And after that, it was of course time for Bruno himself. He started off with Onix, so I started off with Articuno, and I used an Ice Beam to take it out in a single hit. Now next up was this Hitmonchan, so I switched into Zapdos, used Drill Peck. He missed his Rock Tomb and then healed up, so 2 more Drill Pecks was enough to finish him off. Now next was his Machamp, so I did go for Drill Peck. He healed up with his Citrus Berry and used Bulk Up, so I knew that another Drill Peck wasn't going to take him out, so I decided to go for Thunder, but he was left with a sliver of health. And then I thought he was going to heal up, so I used Thunder Wave, but he actually used Cross Chop and he took me out. So then I went into Moltres, finished it off with a Flamethrower, and Hitmonlee came out. He did some amazing damage with Mega Kick, but my Flamethrower was enough to take him down in 2 hits. And last up was Onix, so I went back into Articuno and finished it off with an Ice Beam, and then we can head on to the 3rd Elite Four member. Of course, it's Agatha with her Ghost types, and she leads with a Gengar, and I decide to lead with my Articuno. I go for a Blizzard, which does a load of damage, but she set up a double team. Luckily next turn my Ice Beam doesn't miss and we take it out. Next was Arbok, so I switched in Nidoking and did some chip damage with Dig, but then she switched into her Haunter, which has Levitate, so my Dig literally didn't do anything. He then put me to sleep and took me out with a Dream Eater. Then I decided to switch in Zapdos and finish off the Haunter with 2 Drill Pecks. Next was Golbat, and I knew that the Thunder was going to be enough to take it out, so I used that. Arbok was next, so I switched in Moltres, and that thing also couldn't tank 2 Flamethrowers. Her last Pokemon was of course her stronger Gengar, which put me to sleep immediately and whittled me down with Nightmare and Sludge Bomb until I eventually hit a Blizzard, but then I did go down to a Sludge Bomb. So then I switched in my Zapdos and a Thunder was able to finish off the Gengar, and now it's time for the final Elite Four member, Lance the Dragon Master. And of course, like always, his first Pokemon is Gyarados, so I already know that I'm going to be leading with Zapdos. I got a little bit unlucky because my first Thunder did miss, but he only used Bite, which barely did any damage, so the next Thunder did take him out. The next Pokemon was Aerodactyl, so I stayed in again. He used Ancient Power, which almost took me out, but a single Thunder was enough to finish him off. Now his next 3 Pokemon were Dragonair and Dragonite, so I knew that my Articuno was going to be able to finish all of these guys off with some Ice Beams, and that's exactly what I did. So now that was a very easy Elite Four member. With Lance out of the way, it's finally time to fight the Knight. Is he going to deny us now? You'll have to see. With his first Pokemon being Pidgeot, I decided to lead with my Zapdos, and a single Thunder was enough to take it out. Next was Rhydon, so I switched him to my Nidoking, and I thought that I was able to land a Surf, but he take down me, and it actually did some chip damage, so then after that I switched into my Articuno and easily took him down with an Ice Beam. Next up was Arcanine, and I switched into Snorlax to try and put it to sleep, and I got so lucky because I was left with 5 health and I did get off a yawn. So next turn he was put to sleep, and then I could easily switch in my Zapdos and finish him off with 2 Thunders. He then switched into Venusaur and I switched into Moltres. A Fire Blast wasn't quite enough to take him out, and next turn he switched into his Gyarados, so I had to switch into my Venomoth to sacrifice it. After my Venomoth fainted, I decided to switch in Zapdos, used Shockwave, but he was left with like 2 HP. So he got a Dragon Rage off, then healed up, and 2 more Shockwaves killed the Gyarados. Next was Alakazam, so I switched in Moltres, used Flamethrower. It didn't do enough damage, so next turn I used Fire Blast, which took it out, and last was his Venusaur. And of course I'm going to stay in with Moltres and finish this game with a Flamethrower. And that's it, we completed another amazing challenge, the No XP challenge. This was something very different than what I normally do, and I really enjoyed it because I didn't have to grind at all. I just had to find some strategies, find the right Pokemon, and then try to beat the next obstacle. I will definitely recommend this challenge to you, and if you have any other suggestions, leave them in the comments down below. May I also remind you to follow me on Twitter for regular updates and announcements. And I also want to thank my Patreon supporters Mickey Googla, Benatril. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. And as always people, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. I'm Zwigo, and I'll see you guys next time.